Hello and welcome to another Magic of Fishing video. Today I'm at home in Woking in Surrey, but later I hope to be on the banks of a local club water catching a few fish, and I hope to do that with some secret recipe bread paste that my granddad showed me to make about 45 years ago when I was a young lad. If you've not seen it, there's a separate video. I'll put the link in the comments below where I show you how to make that. And it's inspired by a chapter in my book, The Magic of Fishing, in which I spend a lot of time talking about my granddad. He was a real hero to me, a retired steel worker, taught me how to fish and gave me a lifelong love for the sport. So hopefully I'll show that his old bait is still effective and try and winkle out a couple of fish. But it is going to be tricky because it's red hot. It's September, sunny Sunday afternoon, but we've got 30 degrees plus heat, and we've had a very unusual heat wave for the last week. So it might be tricky, but hopefully give it a go. Look out for that video. In this film, I'd like to show you a couple of other things, which is how I maximise my time on the bank through a less is more approach. And secondly, I found my granddad's old tackle box up in the loft. It's one of the few things I kept as a memento when he passed around 20 years ago. And it's nostalgic stuff for me, hopefully for you too, but it also is another reminder of how little gear you actually need to go fishing and to catch fish. So let's have a look at the box that I found recently. But before we do, here's a picture of the man himself. I think that was taken at Scarborough Mere. We're on holiday many years ago. And you can probably see just about a wry smile on his face behind the pipe because he's got an absolute tiddler suspended in one hand. But that didn't matter to him at that age. He was just happy to be on the bank and getting bites. And I think as I've got older now with 4 teenage kids, very busy work, that's the kind of attitude I'm taking more and more. I still love my match fishing. Used to do a fair bit of specimen angling for carp and still like to chase barbel occasionally, but more and more it's about getting out there as often as I can and just enjoying every moment. And I think that's a healthy attitude to have if you've got a life that's as busy as mine. And here it is. That's got some proper age to it. Wooden box, couple of metal clasps on the front, and I inherited that, or decided to keep it when he passed, say 20 years ago. He'd been using it for as long as I can remember before that, so I'm imagining it's at least as old as I am, half a century or more, and it's certainly got that look about it. 1 or 2 war wounds and a bit of rust on the hinges at the back, but that is a magic box of tricks because it will have brought him and me so much pleasure over the years. Now let's have a look inside, which I did for the first time in a long time just yesterday. He's got his reel in there, not an expensive one, fairly cheap centerpin reel with Bakelite handles. It's not got any line on it, but I'm going to re-spool it this afternoon before I go fishing and actually use it along with one of his old floats to try and catch some fish on his bread paste recipe. Now you can see some of the contents a bit more clearly, including some very old hooks to nylon in packets, ready tied. Some old Sheffield shops there, Lakins and Oakley's, which used to be my shop of choice in Crooks and Sheffield, but no longer exists and hasn't done for a long time. But Billy Clark is still going. And this, if ever we needed it, which I think we all do, is a reminder of just how little you needed to go fishing back in the day, and indeed still do need. And yeah, a lot's changed. I have as much tackle as the next mad keen angler, and I'm a real tackle tart, as they say. Up in Sheffield, I've got my Matrix seat box, my Daiwa rod holdall, my Preston carryall, multiple keep nets, 16 metre pole, multiple top kits. But Here you can see what one man used to manage to go fishing on quite happily with. And we've got the hooks, as we've already talked about. We've got some basic split shot, some anchor shot there. He's not even got any big shot, you know, nothing above number 4. He wasn't a refined fisherman, you know. There's some dust shot there, I think, or one larger shot. But number 6 was really the sort of lightest shot he carried with him. And because his eyesight was going in the later years, he always carried these pliers to help squeeze them on. Beyond that, you've got an old metal disgorger, of course, for unhooking any fish that hooked a bit deeper than normal. You've got one bullet lead for ledgering. He didn't do much of that, but I think somewhere in here, yes, there is a old-fashioned spring tip, if you remember those. That's like somewhere between a swing tip and a quiver tip, brightly coloured end, screw fitting to attach it to any rod with a screw on the end eye. And he did only have one rod, so he used that for float fishing and ledgering, did most of his fishing with floats, but he could screw this in much like a swing tip or a quiver tip. It would show him when he'd got an indication using that bullet lead. He might have had a few more weights and feeders back in the day in his wicker seat box, but certainly towards the end of his life, this was it. And you can see some of the lovely old floats, heavy handmade stick style float there. Another handmade beauty, a sort of wind beater with a bit of a body at the bottom, hand painted. And we've got quills. That looks to me like an old crow quill, perhaps, with a black tip for when you're fishing against white water. Oh, one of my favourites, the old perch bobber. Now, these were what we used on the River Derwent. I talk about that in the book, for trout, but also any running water, really, where you needed to hold back. He wasn't, say, a refined fisherman, and that was the kind of float he used when there was a bit of current involved. And we've got some old handmade waggler or dart style floats. And what I'm going to try and catch a fish on later, I think this is exactly the kind of float that I started out with, a porcupine quill. Looks like it's a hand painted job, or maybe shop bought, but it's worn with use. Just a simple wire loop whipped on at the end. And that's what I used at the pond I talk about in the book, and I'm going to try and use something like that this afternoon to catch some fish. And here we've got pretty much the only other items in the box. You've got plummet for establishing the depth when you are float fishing. That was his preferred method, and some old rubber bands that have almost perished, but they were attached via these little pins, and that's how he kept his floats in slightly better order than they are now. But amazing stuff, and just shows you how much has changed. Now, one thing I do have quite a bit of down here in Surrey is rods, and that's because nowadays you can buy lots of specialist rods for different fish, conditions, species, and I like to have a few ready-made versions set up. I've got that luxury. So there's a power float set up, strong feeder rods in that one, and I generally use them in this simple quiver rod bag, but I'll select which rods I want for the day, shove them in that bag. It's always got a landing net handle, a rod rest, and I'm ready to go. And other than the rods, I try and keep things to a minimum. As I say, I've got plenty of gear up in Sheffield that I use for the matches, but down here I want to be able to just chuck a few things in the car and get going within minutes, because my opportunities are often rare or last minute. I've got a few different kinds of landing nets and an unhooking mat there if I'm fishing for bigger fish. They can be thrown in the car along with the rods. And in this corner I've got an umbrella, which I use occasionally, and a couple of carp rods ready in their sleeves. But other than a cool bag up there for food and bait, some ground bait bowls, this bag is really all that I need to get going, whether it's summer or winter, whether I'm fishing for small stuff or having a go at barbel. I'll have a look inside and show you what I've got. If we have a look in the main compartment, obviously you've got a bait box, and I do keep a whole range of bait boxes handy, whether it's for live bait like maggots, worms, or something like sweet corn or hemp. In fact, I've got a whole cupboard full. There you can see a good range of bait tubs, so I can grab what I need and get going. And other than the any bait tubs that I'm taking and a towel to clean my hands, the main thing that's in this central compartment is my tackle box, which is a bit bigger than my granddad's, but I still use many of the same principles in terms of less is more and only having in there what I really need. So let's have a look inside. So we'll give you a whirlwind tour of what I class as essentials. I've got a pair of scissors, quite a few hook length options, and I do like to tie my own hooks still sometimes. So we've got everything from £8, £9 breaking strain down to some £3 stuff, but I've also got it down to about £1 in there for lighter roach fishing. Got my old school hook tie, which I still use, and if you've never learnt to use one of those, then I don't blame you. It's tricky to get to grips with, but once you've learnt, they're fantastic for using loose hooks like this. Most of my hooks I use are barbless. There are one or two micro barbed versions really just for river fishing when I'm feeder fishing or fishing for barbel in and around snags. So I've got a whole multitude of hooks, far more than my granddad would have ever kept. Many of these are aimed at the river. Super Spades, very strong hook. I've also got some stuff for still water, some ready banded hooks there for when I'm fishing large pellets, for example, for carp. Here are some more specimen sized hooks, size 10s. Might use those for perch fishing or chub, for example. And then up to size 8, pretty strong stuff, which I'd use for carp or barbel. Shot wise, I tend to just carry one dispenser now of these rugby type ones, which are nice and streamlined for float fishing in rivers, whether I'm bollow or stick float fishing. They strike through the water well. I also keep a good supply of stots, these much smaller size 10 or 8s. I like a slightly more refined shotting approach to what my granddad would have known. Got some back leads there if I'm fishing on the river and there's a lot of boat traffic. Various leads in there. A square guru one there. But yeah, you get the idea. There's a good selection of leads and plummets in there. And then back to this main compartment, I've got some more modern gear like a pellet bander. Plummets. River waggler there. I tend to just keep a few floats in here that I'm using regularly. So I've got a Y-stem stick, another stick float there. What else have we got? A selection of river wagglers, and even a bollow float there. Also got my glasses because I'm struggling to see a bit more these days, and in this side I've got some Olivet weights, some bullets, just some bigger leads there for float fishing, bollow or waggler. And over on this side I've got various accessories, some pellet bands, some feeder links. I always like to use those so you can change feeder very easily without any aggro. And I also think these are one of the best inventions ever. There's many makes and brands, but these micro hook length swivels really are great for stopping line twist if you're using baits like double caster or maggot, and you can also change hook length in a second, and that makes sure you're not lazy and you're using the right hook length and hook for the situation. Also got some float stots and some other feeder gear in there. And talking of feeders, I don't keep those in my main tackle box. I've got a separate pocket here on my bag. In the garage I've got a selection of them that I keep in these little pouches or tubs, and then I'll just grab what I need to go fishing. So let's see, last time I went, I've got my forceps there for unhooking fish. Let's see what I took with me. There you can see a selection of small cage feeders, plastic ground bait feeders, different sizes, weights, and that just really, keeps a limit on how much weight I'm carrying around with me. I'll just grab the feeders I need for any given session. Now in the pocket next to that I've got a whole variety of ready tied hooks. So I do tie my own hooks, but sometimes, again, time is of the essence, so having a few ready tied options means that I can spend more time fishing and less time preparing. Then we come to a back pocket, quite a long pocket along the main compartment, and in here I've got what I call my barbel box. That's just another smaller tackle box, and inside I've got the stuff that I would take with me if I was after bigger fish. So some big hooks in there, so from 16 through to 6s. Got some braided hook links, little boilie or hair rigger needle, and some bigger leads in there up to sort of 2 ounces for when the river's really pulling through. Small float stops. But all that's my barbel or heavier river gear. And then I showed you how I kept a selection of floats in my main tackle box. Always got some for the river, some for still waters, but of course any angler will have more than a handful of floats usually, and here is a tube of my wagglers, many of them Drennan crystals, but a whole selection there from insert thin tips for fishing on still waters through to thicker bodied and tipped river floats. Then in addition to these wagglers, I've got another small box with, well, shorter box anyway, with plenty of other options in. Small still water floats, surface fishing controller, some very traditional handmade floats that I might still feel in the mood for if I'm after perch. Nice trotting style floats there. So yeah, plenty of float choice, but they're very light. Then deeper within this longer pocket, I've got some weighing scales. Not essential for everyone, but I still like to weigh a decent catch. Some long unhooking forceps there for pike fishing. So I've even got stuff in here I can go off in winter and have a go for pike spinning with. It's a little saw blade that goes on the end of a bank stick if I need to cut back some greenery to make a swim. We're nearly done. We've got an end pocket, more glasses, reading glasses in case I lose the other pair. Rod rest, another rod rest. Oh, and a bait dropper. That's very handy for fishing the deep river way around where I am. Get down to the bottom fast and release some hemp or casters. Then inside the pocket itself, got all sorts. Some really stinky cheesy garlic pellets, good for chub and barbel. This is what I call my medical bag. I've got some painkillers if I suddenly have some kind of unexpected headache, some antihistamines, tablets. I've got PVA for carp, barbel, chub fishing, dissolvable. More PVA. Some more hook lengths, and of course my club books when I'm off. Might see a bailiff. And underneath my tackle box in the main compartment, I've got a catty and a small bank stick with a rod rest. So let's get everything back in. So I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane with my granddad's old tackle box, and also a reminder with the whirlwind tour of my tackle bag and my own tackle box that you don't need a ton of tackle to go out there and enjoy yourself, even just for a couple of hours like I'm going to try and do this afternoon. In that bag I've got gear that I can use for everything from pike fishing in winter to carp in summer, barbel and chub on the river, all the stuff that I really enjoy, like trotting a stick float or a bollow float for roach. I can go to a commercial fishery, a local river like the Wey, or indeed a club pond like I'm going to try this afternoon. So less is sometimes more. It's good to have a choice of rods, of course, and reels and line for different size fish and species of fish, but otherwise that bag has really allowed me to do a lot more fishing. Now I'm, say, in my 50s and busy with 4 teenagers and work. And if you haven't been out for a while, perhaps just look at your tackle, try paring things down a bit, and maybe that'll help motivate you to get back out there on the water. See you next time, and look out for a video of me using my granddad's paste. I'll update shortly. And as always, if you've enjoyed watching this, please do subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on the notifications and share with your friends. Until next time, tight lines, and I'll see you soon.